Okay. Welcome, everybody. Again, if you are an attendee and not a panelist, if you would turn off your cameras, and also if you're not already muted, mute your mics. That way our panelists will be the only ones on camera and be at the top, and there won't be any noise interruption. Thank you. So welcome and thank you for joining the panel discussion today. I'm Patricia Millian. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Upper Keys BPW, and I'm going to be the host and moderator today. A big thank you to our illustrious panel of experts who have generously volunteered their time to share their personal experiences with everyone today about serving on a nonprofit board. Before we get started, I have a couple of quick announcements. First, this event is brought to you by the Upper Keys BPW, or Business and Professional Women. I see we have a lot of people who are not local members here. We are a nonprofit organization that supports working women in the Upper Keys through information, education, and advocacy. And this panel discussion is part of our professional development series. We also host monthly events for our members and guests. Most of our events are open to the general public. And I wanted to highlight our upcoming April event. It will be on Wednesday, April 20th, and it is a member expo. So our members who have businesses or nonprofits or a cause to promote will set up tables and have information to share with attendees, and maybe some goodies too. And it's going to be held at the beautiful new Upper Keys Center of the College of the Florida Keys at mile marker 106.4 Bayside. If you haven't been to the new building, I strongly encourage you. It's a beautiful building. And you can register for the event on our website at upperkeysbpw.org. I would also like to give a big thank you to all of you who made donations with your registrations today. We have, last time I checked this morning, we had over $350 donated with the registrations. Twice a year, we use that money to award scholarships to women who are pursuing professional certifications, higher education degrees, or training classes to advance their careers. And the application window is currently open for our May scholarship awards. So if you do not, you do not have to be a BPW member to qualify to apply for a scholarship. You do have to be a resident of the Florida Keys for at least 3 years, have a high school diploma or GED, and have at least 5 years of post-high school work experience. The deadline to apply for the scholarship is April 15th, so there's still a couple of weeks left. And again, you'll find more information and the application on our website at upperkeysbpw.org. Hold on just a second. I have to let a few more people in. Juggling a little bit. Okay, that's it for the announcements. Before we introduce the panelists, I have a couple of housekeeping notes and then a quick poll. Again, for the people who have just joined, if you could mute your mics and turn off your cameras, that will leave our panelists present at the top and easier to find when they're speaking. Also, I want to let you know that the session is being recorded so we can share it with members who can't make it today. And if you have questions or input, please put them in the chat. Please leave your mics. There's a lot of people here today, so please leave your mics muted so we don't get any inadvertent background noise or people speaking over each other. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat, and I will pluck questions as we go. Try to keep your questions on the current topic. We're going to cover a lot of material, so I don't want the questions necessarily to get ahead of the content, and know that at the very end, we will take questions on topics that we haven't yet covered. That'll make it a lot easier for me to juggle the questions and the moderating. And that is it. I'm going to put up a quick poll before we do introductions. I just wanted to get a feel for how many people have experience with nonprofit boards. So let me find my little poll. Do you see it? Can you all see it? Apparently so. There we go. That's great. A lot of people with nonprofit board experience attending today. Great, that's 100%. So, wow, 20 of 27 of you have experience on nonprofit boards. So you all should be giving this panel discussion. Right? Okay, hopefully everyone will have something new to learn today. So let me get started. I'm just checking for more attendees. I don't see anybody waiting. Great. Okay, so let's start with some introductions. I'll go around the room. Emma, would you like to start? Just tell us who you are, what you do, and what your general experience is with board service.
Sure. So my name is Emma Hadesy. I'm the executive director of Florida Bay Forever, which is a nonprofit located in Islamorada dedicated to protecting and preserving Florida Bay. So professionally, my experience with boards is in engaging with one as an executive director of a nonprofit organization, but I also sit in on 2 advisory committees, as chair of the Public Policy Committee with the Upper Keys BPW, and also on the Connectivity Committee with the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. So advisory and direct experience with a board from the nonprofit staff perspective.
Great. Leanne? You're muted, Leanne.
Yes, I'm sorry. Sometimes my system's a little bit delayed. I'm Leanne Horrid. I'm a captain with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, and I've been blessed enough to be able to serve on many boards throughout the last 39 years, to include the Children's Shelter, the MARC board, which was a governing board with paid employees. Also currently serving on the Christina's Courage Rape Crisis Center in Key West, as well as the Monroe County Stars of Hope. I've also proudly served on the Upper Keys BPW board previously. So I'm excited that we're doing this panel discussion.
Great, thank you. Jen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer McComb, and I'm currently president and CEO of the Community Foundation of the Florida Keys. I've been in the Florida Keys for 11 years. And in preparing for this, I made a list of what boards I've been on, and I was surprised to see I've been involved with 20 boards. I've served on 12. I'm currently treasurer and secretary of the Courthouse Business Condos, which is where our offices are located. And I'm on the Community Foundation board as a non-voting member. And I've regularly attended, I've been on 12, but regularly attended 8 others that were required for my job. And these included the United Way of the Florida Keys, the Good Health Clinic, the Ocean Reef Community Foundation, and the Florida Keys Children's Shelter.
Great. And Susie?
Hi, I'm Susie Youngberg. I have the pleasure of serving on a couple of boards. I am the current president of the BPW, Business and Professional Women of the Upper Keys. I also serve on the Business and Professional Women Florida on the board of directors and the executive committee as delegate to the Council of Presidents. And I am a staff member of a nonprofit, Marvelous Pet Rescues. We are a 501c3 run by a board of directors, but we do have 2 staff members, me as full-time, and we have an assistant coordinator who works for us.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you all again. I wanted to start with a question related to my own personal experience. I have served on 3 nonprofit boards over the past 20 years or so. One was a domestic violence shelter, one was a film festival, and currently I sit on the board of the Upper Keys BPW. And the first 2 boards were not really a fit for me. In both of those cases, they were really looking for board members with big pockets and connections to high net worth individuals they could tap for fundraising. And because they didn't really tell me this explicitly up front, I went in expecting to maybe roll up my sleeves more and contribute my time and talents in a more hands-on way. And that really never happened. So I didn't last long on those boards. And I was just, I guess, a little confused and turned off and maybe disillusioned about what I thought a board service would look like. And it wasn't really until I joined the BPW board that I realized I was a better fit for a working board versus a governing board. So I would like to start there and talk a little bit about what is the difference between a governing board and a working board, and what types of organizations do they tend to serve. Susie, I think we talked about you starting first.
Yes. So at Marvelous Pet Rescues, as I said, we are, we are governed by a board of directors, but we also have staff. So at our rescue, the board of directors makes the decisions for the governing. They make our big picture decisions, but we're also fortunate that they're also a working board. So even though we have staff, our board assists the staff. They're here, maybe not on an every day, 9 to 5, but they're here on a pretty regular basis doing, even just, rolling up their sleeves and doing the work that needs to be done. So we're really fortunate to have them there, in addition to governing. I think, we had talked about how a lot of small startup nonprofits have working boards for a long time. And even though Marvelous was able to afford staff, pretty much from the beginning, it's still been a small staff and not enough to do all of the work that needs to be done on a daily basis here. So the board is very involved. But then also, serving with BPW, it's as a civic organization, we're, I guess, basically the same as well. We're kind of a governing and a working board with the Upper Keys. On the BPW Florida, which is our state organization, it's interesting how it is set up. We have a board of directors which do the big picture. They're the governing body of the organization. But then out of that board of directors, we have what we call the executive committee, which is a few officers from the board who do more of the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, if you will, figuring out, what needs to be done for the organization on a day-to-day basis. So I guess I would say that all of the boards that I'm involved with are a combination of governing and working.
Yes, I guess that was a clarification, an important clarification, right? Really, all boards, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but all boards have a governance task, right? And some are more working than others, right? Are there flavors of that? Does anyone else have an experience of it maybe going through from a pure working board and then becoming a governing board? Has anyone been on a board from the beginning and then saw that evolution? Anything to share there?
I can say that for Christina's Courage Rape Crisis Center, we did just that. We were contracting services outside of the board until a point where, fortunately or unfortunately, we had enough need for service that we then employed sexual assault nurse examiners, and we still currently do. And then fortunately also receive grant monies and have other organizations to answer to for those. Florida Rape Crisis Council for therapists and services, a victim advocate, the same thing. Another organization to answer to as a board. We're providing the housing and we put them together with the victims. But it started out as simply a location without staff to a location with professionals on scene. And it was an interesting transition, especially in that type of a situation. It is a services based. A victim could go to a hospital, but it is so much better to have them in a setting like the Rape Crisis Center, and the services available to them immediately, and the forensic investigation part of it. You have the right type of medical staff that you may not see at an emergency room. So the need was there. And as we realized the need was greater, we found that we needed to employ staff. So it was an interesting transition. It did change the makeup of our board, actually. We went from strictly a fundraising board to recognizing that we now were also governing employees.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that governance, right? That's what they have in common to some extent. what is the fundamental role of a nonprofit board of directors in either case? Jen?
Well, there's actually a lot of things we're going to talk about today. Might be there's gray areas, and all of us might have different opinions on it, and even national experts might disagree on things. But actually, this question, there is a right answer, and we teach it in our Leadership Success Academy that we hold every spring for nonprofit board members. And this comes straight out of Board Source, which is like the leading authority, that anyone on any board has these 8 things that they have to do. And that's determine the mission and vision of the organization. They select the CEO or executive director and evaluate his or her performance. Number 3, they're in charge of strategic planning and organization planning. 4, they love this one, fundraising and resource development. 5, this one's very important, ensuring strong fiduciary oversight and financial management. That's a liability that any board member has, and you have to realize that when you join a board. 6, approving and monitoring the organization's programs and services. And that's just approving what the staff does, not actually having to run it. You know, that's what we were just talking about, the nuances of working versus governance. And 7, enhancing the organization's public image. And 8, looking back and assessing your own performance as a governing body. So those are the 8 things that no matter whether you're on a working or governance board, you have to know that you're going to be responsible for.
I know that the financial oversight can be intimidating for some people. What level of experience is essential or valuable on the financial side in serving on a board?
You want me to take that one too?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
You have to realize that even if you don't understand everything in the financials, you have to trust the treasurer and the people who do understand it. And we teach, you know, in our Leadership Success Academy, basically how to read those documents you get at the board meeting, which is the balance sheet and budget, and you know, the board's approving the budget. That's part of the organization's programs. So you do have to have some knowledge, even if you don't understand every single line item. And we teach you how to look for red flags of things that, like what happened at the Boys and Girls Clubs, to see what checks and balances are in place. Are 2 people signing the checks and all that? And I really recommend our Leadership Success Academy for learning those basics.
I will second that, having just attended the Leadership Academy. It was really a great program to learn the various aspects and really feel more prepared as a board member.
Thank you.
Okay, what about advisory boards, right? There are also advisory boards. Sometimes they're called advisory councils. It's yet another organization or another group that supports a nonprofit. What is their role and how is it different from the governing boards? Emma?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you know, I think in a very simple level is that these groups advise. They don't have the same measures for accountability for the organization that you would see with the governing board, but they are invaluable to nonprofit organizations because they provide technical expertise and insight on a specific issue or programmatic areas for the organization. So for example, I sit on 2 advisory committees. One is as chair of the Public Policy Committee with the BPW, where we advise on public policy matters that impact women and working women's issues in the Upper Keys, but then also sitting on the Connectivity Committee with the Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council, where we are an advisory committee to the advisory committee for the sanctuary. And so we are there to share ideas and knowledge and expertise, but we are not making decisions for the organization. We leave that to the governing boards.
So an advisory committee to the advisory council, is that what I heard?
Yes.
Wow, see, there are so
Double.
many different levels and ways to get involved. And
That's
Susie,
a lot of advising.
yeah. And Susie, you have personal experience on an advisory council. Let's tell us a little bit more about that.
I do. I am on the Upper Keys Advisory Council for the Community Foundation of the Florida Keys. So that is something that the Community Foundation started last year, year before last, before I think all of the primary bulk of their board members had been down in the Lower Keys or Key West, and they saw the need to have people who were more familiar geographically with the different areas in the Keys. I think that's where an advisory board can help a lot of times. So while a lot of the board members are located in the Lower Keys, they created an advisory council. Well, actually one for the Lower Keys, but one in the Middle Keys and one in the Upper Keys. So what we have done with the Upper Keys Advisory Council is, since we know our area more, we know the needs up here in the Upper Keys that they may not be aware of, that we were able to advise them on grant status, some needs of some people who might need some extra funds. One of the first things we did as the Upper Keys Advisory Council was to ask for money to be given to our local Upper Keys school. Because of the pandemic and everything that had been going on, morale in the schools was at an all-time low. There was a lot of fear of suicides. Unfortunately, we had a few of those in the last year or so. So we earmarked some money to be given to the Upper Keys schools for well-being, just to help the kids with do events and services and things that could help their morale, help them to deal with what's going on. But that, I think that's where the advisory council was so important, because I think without that, the foundation may not have even been aware of the need, specifically in our Upper Keys area. So the advisory councils are very helpful to advise the boards of directors of the organizations on needs in different areas, whether it be geographic or personal or, whatever the mission may be.
I think it's kind of a good way to call them the subject matter experts that contribute the information to help the board members to vote or make decisions. And I think that's a critical part of, as we discuss the overall service and the right fit for a board, the advisory committees can really contribute to maybe what a board member might be lacking in knowledge, but have tons of enthusiasm.
Do you have a specific example, Leanne? Anything that you've had a personal experience with on a particular skill set that has been helpful?
One of the advisory committees for the MARC board, when I served on the MARC board, was the committee for the group homes. Now, the board members are not in the group homes that are managed every day. It's like managing your house times 20. So getting that information and what was needed in those group homes with the clients themselves, that really helped all of us as board members to know what direction the board was going in, what additional needs the group homes had. So we could, with all good conscience, vote on the issues, financial and management issues.
Nice. Anyone else? Jen, any experience with different advisory boards or councils with particular skill sets?
Well, I think a great example is we have advisors on our investment committee that are very savvy and knowledgeable with investing, and because we have millions of dollars invested, and that takes the liability off our board and our staff. And a lot of advisory boards are like our councils and throughout the Keys are very active working councils. But sometimes if you see people's names on a website and they're on the advisory board of something, they might not even meet at all. They could just be people that are very important people in the community, and the organization wants to keep their prestigious names involved with the organization and keep them involved, and hopefully they'll still be donors. And so not all advisors are actually doing a whole lot.
Yeah, the financial one is interesting though, right? It partly answers the question we talked about earlier of how do you fill gaps with financial knowledge. That would be one way to help fill gaps with financial knowledge on the board side, right? If you pulled in some advisors who are very knowledgeable on that side. Okay, let's move on from the mechanics and talk about the personal rewards. I'd like everyone to share a little bit about what your experience has been and what benefits you have personally received from board service. Susie, would you like to go first?
Sure. I have found serving on the board of a nonprofit to be an extremely rewarding experience. I think, serving especially on a local board, it helps you give back to your community in a way that, you know, it's hard to do in other positions because you become so involved. But one of the big things for me has just been gaining leadership experience. You know, being on the Upper Keys BPW board, it's a very friendly board. I will say that to anyone who might be thinking about getting involved in board service. We have really, you know, tried to, while we do obey the Robert's Rules of Order and try to, you know, be as formal as a board needs to be to do the business at hand, we also are forgiving. We've learned along the way. We learn as we go. And it's just been, again, a great experience for me just to learn more about a leadership role and what's involved in that, and being able to influence and be part of the decisions made for an organization that I really care about, which is actually how I got on the board of BPW, because soon after joining the organization, I found that, you know, I truly loved it. I had a passion for it. And when I was asked to serve on the board, I was so flattered that I was going to be given that opportunity. I admit I was a little scared. It was the first board that I had the opportunity to serve on. But again, I found, even though it was a little intimidating, I found everyone just to be very friendly and willing to teach me what needed to be done. So I think, you know, a lot of people join boards because it helps pad your resume, which is of course a good thing. But I think make sure that it's something that you feel passionate about. I believe that's where you're going to get the most out of it. If it's something that you really feel either is a need for you to grow or a niche somewhere that you are needed to help that organization thrive and grow.
I think you made a really good point, particularly with organizations like BPW, civic organizations, you know, organizations that don't have staff, and really the working board is doing all of the planning with committees and assistants and volunteers to the extent that they can recruit them. But if you're a member of an organization and you're looking around and thinking, you know, I can think of ways for this organization to be better, right? Volunteering to help on a committee or a board gives you a voice in how the benefits are delivered to the members, right? Of what that value looks like. You can really influence that in an organization like that. Leanne, how about you? Personal?
All of those things that Susie and you both spoke of are absolutely the benefits. And I can say, yes, Upper Keys BPW, very forgiving board. I've served on many boards. And when they asked me, I was more than happy to do it and learned so very much and learned from my mistakes even. I have to say that's one of the best benefits of BPW board life, is that you do actually get the opportunity to learn from other board members. So I think leadership is a big part of it. You know, you learn that from your other board members. For me, in my career, the leadership that I've learned serving on boards has been a tremendous help, because oftentimes communication is the sometimes sticking point and sometimes the best thing of working with a board. And either way, the mistakes or the good, you learn and you bring back to the job. So I can say that's part of it. The other thing I think is serving on a board gives you an amazing community perspective. And if you are in a job where you are, in fact, a paid job, that you are, in fact, serving the community, getting a good community perspective is hugely helpful. And that's been one of the best benefits for me with serving on a board.
Very nice. Emma, how about you?
You're all taking the words out of my mouth. I'll just echo putting passion into practice. I think that at any time that we are volunteering and in service of our community, we really are giving, you know, our time and our skills to these organizations, and we're not being compensated for it. And so it really has to be a passion project. And so, you know, speaking on behalf of my role with the Upper Keys BPW, you know, I am a bit of a policy wonk. And so that allows for me to dive into policy work in areas that I don't get to do in my day-to-day. And so it's a passion project. And I think that that's one of the greatest rewards that you can have, in addition to all of the skills and opportunities that you have for leadership development and skills development within these working groups.
Jen, anything to add?
Well, everything that Emma, Susie, and Leanne said, but also if you pick the right board, I think it can be life-changing. The first board that I served on was Dress for Success Greater Orlando. And at the time, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, we have a lot of freezing here in our office on our computers. So at the time I was a real estate broker, and I worked 7 days a week, and my whole life was about making as much money as possible, and getting as many listings as possible, having as many closings as possible. And that's all I did. And I feel like it was a very selfish time of my life. But one day I was reading the newspaper, the Orlando Sentinel, and probably looking for my own listings and looking for my picture and all that. And I read an article about Dress for Success and how it helps women become self-sufficient. And these are women that are battered women coming out of shelters, coming out of jail, coming out of rehab. And this organization takes them and helps them. A lot of them don't even have clothes, so they're helping them get prepared for a job interview, get suits for the job interview, get the interview skills, and then once they get the job, help them stay in the job. And I was just, I was so taken by the story, and I literally got on the phone, and back then it was like in the wall phone with a cordless phone at least, but it was like a real phone, and called them right away. And the next thing I knew, I was volunteering in the boutique. And then of course I was asked to be on the board, and next thing I knew, I was in charge of the fundraising. And it started where I was working maybe 10 hours a week, and then it was like 30 and 40 hours a week. I was doing the fundraising because they had no employees. It was a working board. And my husband at the time was like, my gosh, it seems like you really like the nonprofit. You're way more than real estate. And I said, you know what, I do. And then that's when I looked for a job in fundraising. And now, you know, you see where my career's gone. So, and it's all because I was on that board.
Wow. Truly, truly life-changing.
Yeah, and then I can't go without giving a shout out to Rotary. I think anyone interested in service, Rotary board is a great way to go. And being president of Rotary and having to run the meeting every single week for 52 weeks a year, plus the committee meetings, plus the board meetings, it really gave me a lot of confidence and leadership skills that are very important to my job now.
Great. Okay, let's talk, we touched on this a little bit already, but let's talk a little bit about prerequisites, right? What does a board look for in just the minimum skill sets, experience, knowledge, or is it more about characteristics than experience? And I'm sure it varies. So there'll be different perspectives on this, but what's important, you know, I remember the first time I was asked to join a board, I thought, why are they asking me? I'm not qualified to sit on a board. And I think that's an assumption from a lot of people, that it's only certain people that are qualified to sit on the board. So I'd like to just give everyone a feel for what, you know, what does that diversity look like? What is the minimum requirement to serve on a board? Leanne, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, there are actually some boards that do in fact have in their bylaws some prerequisites, but personally, from my own experience, I would say that the word that you use, Patricia, diversity. I believe that a board is really best serving the organization and the people that they intend to serve by being a very diversified board. There are some boards that I've served on where I am sitting next to all cops, and it may in fact not even be a board that relates at all to anything to do with law enforcement. And the unfortunate part is then that's how everything is, that's how you vote on things from that perspective. And, you know, not everything needs that kind of a perspective. So I think it's really, really important that, especially if you're deciding for yourself, if you want to be a member of a board, you know, look to see who else is on that board and decide, do I have something that's unique to give? Jen, I think it's interesting that you ended up on the fundraising part of it, and it kind of became life-changing after first hearing the whole part of being in real estate and making money. Fortunately, you carried some of that right over when you went to work for the nonprofit, because for that time, that's exactly what fit. So there was no doubt an immediate bridge. And I think that's part of it. Sometimes the board need is going to fit exactly who you are and what your goals and values are. But I think overall, when any of us are deciding to serve on a board, that we want to look at the diversification of the board as a whole.
I'd just like to add to that. And first, I'll just, it's such an interesting question, Pat. And I wonder if as many men are asking themselves if they are qualified to sit on a board when asked, because we are amongst a group of women today. We should not be asking ourselves if we're qualified as much. But I think that the number one requirement is certainly enthusiasm for the cause and for the role. I think that a willingness to ask tough questions is maybe not on the board roles and responsibilities, but being able to put yourself out there and ask those questions. And then really, I think with specific skill sets, I think that will apply to specific board roles. So your treasurer needs to be able to read and interpret your financial reports for you. It's helpful to have a secretary who is organized and a great listener. So there are some specific roles that do, I think, have a skill sets that should be associated, but generally just being excited and willing to serve is a great place to start.
I'll agree with that. I think you'll probably hear me say that more than once in the course of this workshop. I think that passion and interest is, number one. Make it something that that you're truly passionate about, that you want to be involved in, and and your skills. You need to have some skills to offer, but I think most of us have something that can be offered, and a good board is going to train you and work with you to find the best fit for your skill sets and what they need. Have an idea of what you can bring to the table, but then be willing to be flexible based on the needs of the board. I was kind of laughing at Jen's story about being in real estate and getting the nonprofit bug. I was in sales for, 25, 30 years. I traveled all over, it was all about the, doing the job and the prestige of being the traveling salesperson. And I volunteered to be locally on a Relay for Life committee just to help plan an event down here, and discovered that fundraising was what I loved to do. And what I did was took all those years of experience in sales and converted that into a passion for fundraising, and then finding a cause that I cared about and was able to turn that around. So I think that's a lot of it, is taking your skills and figuring out, what you can bring to the table for a board.
Great. Okay, let's get down to the commitment, right? What does it take? What is expected of a board member? It is, it's a volunteer position for nonprofits in most cases. And so to some extent, it's what you can contribute, but there are expectations, and I'm sure it varies. Emma, you want to start maybe talking a little bit about the expectations in terms of the day-to-day and the time commitments, and what are you signing up for when you're volunteering for a working board?
Absolutely. So as you said, it varies from organization to organization. And if you are interested in joining a board before you are formally installed, you should have a list of those expectations beforehand as a board member. You should know what you're signing up for, and the organization should be able to articulate that to you ahead of time. But on a very basic level, the commitment involves attending, preparing, and participating in your board meetings, however frequently those take place. That does vary from organization to organization. And assisting kind of in all of those, I think, 8 areas that Jen mentioned earlier that are required. So fiduciary oversight, but then also, you are required to be the best cheerleader for your organization. So attending and participating in programs, events, and fundraising efforts, participating in committees as required by the organization. And again, these meet with varying intervals of frequency. And then I think there's always a certain amount of being on call, at least from a governing board with staff perspective, of being on call for your executive director. I know that I am frequently calling board members for various issues of advice that I need. But again, all depends, but I think that's generally what you can expect in terms of responsibility.
And that was a governing board. That was my mistake. I said working, but really you were talking about a governing board. And Susie, I think you were going to speak a little bit more about, the difference there in terms of commitment and expectations for a working board.
Right. I think, both boards have a lot of responsibility and a lot of time commitments, again, depending on the organization and what's expected. I think with, there, again, I use the term, rolling up your sleeves and actually, digging in and doing the work that needs to be done, whether it be being there for the events, helping to plan and set up for events that need to be done, or, sometimes in my case with, at the pet rescue, it's, going and picking up a dog, for us, bringing it in or taking them to the vets. We look to our board members to do a lot of that. It is tough when you're on a working board that are all volunteers, because the work still has to be done, even though we, in a case like what with the Upper Keys BPW, we all have jobs, we all have full-time careers, but yet we are on this working board. And if we don't do the work that needs to be done, it doesn't get done. So there is, some time commitment and some work commitment. But again, if you're on a good board, you spread the load out, because that is one of the problems with an all volunteer board, is you can't burn your volunteers out. So you have to be careful and, spread the workload around and make sure that everyone is able to do the time commitment that is needed for the working board.
And I'm sure it varies by position. Leanne, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What are the positions that have heavier requirements versus others?
Very definitely. And I can say, first of all, thank you to all of you that brought up the part about the treasurer having financial experience. Sometimes you learn it while you're on the job. So that's a good example, is serving as a treasurer for a number of boards. If you are serving as a treasurer, your time commitment could just be daily, because you may have bills to pay. You're the person responsible for it. If it's a recurring bill that's been voted on by the board and you're literally writing the checks or making the payments, you're that person that's dealing with all of that. And I can't let this go without saying to Emma, you are completely right. We are all talking about how we are questioning ourselves. Are we qualified? I mean, even me just sort of giving deference to the fact that math not my strongest subject. I can add up a ticket, how much it costs you if you're speeding, but I'm not necessarily going to be your girl for the treasurer. But you learn. I find it very interesting. I hadn't thought about it. What a great perspective. I'm not sure that a man that was asked to serve on the board would really question themselves and their skill set. So thank you. I have to throw that out. But I think that's part of it. You have to make the decision if you have the time to give based on the position that you're going to be serving on the board. Treasurer, secretary, and president, but treasurer, secretary, very, very likely to have some daily correspondence, communication, or fiscal responsibility.
Very helpful. Okay, Jen, Emma, and Susie, all of you, in addition to serving on boards and committees, are in nonprofit staff positions, which means you report to a board of directors. So I think it'll be interesting to have each of you speak a little bit about what do you look for or hope for in a board member? And Emma, you touched on it, but still, I want to hear if there's something else in terms of working for a board. What is your hope and expectation from your board members? Emma?
Do you want me to start?
Oh,
Okay.
Jen, I'm sorry, Jen.
No, that's a
Jen, let's start with Jen.
Okay. Well, I have a list here. Number one, and we've all talked about it, is joy for the mission. Not just, I don't want to have board members that I report to that are just doing it to have it on their resume. You want them to really be passionate about it, embrace the mission. And beyond that, we talk about it in our Leadership Success Academy. Ideally, their number one cause that they're if you see Kathy Brewer around town, she's part of Marvelous Pet Rescue. When you see the person, you associate them with the community foundation. And that's hard because people, maybe they're also for their kids' school or their church. And but if they're not in the top 3 and you see the person and they're involved in 14 different organizations, that's not like going to be my favorite board member. I also think a high functioning board member, they're not going through the motions and just coming to the meeting and sitting there. They're actively participating, they're prepared. And it was mentioned earlier by Emma, questioning things. If you always agree with everything the executive director says, I'm going to do this and this, and oh yeah, that sounds great, that sounds great. Like, you know, you're on the board because we want your expertise to question things and bring things to the table. Of course, a board member that does something between meetings, and you know, in the Community Foundation, you're required to serve on a committee, and those committees do things between meetings. So you're not just going to be coming to the meeting. Exhibiting servant leadership, we cover that in our Leadership Success Academy, that you're not doing it in a self-serving way, but because of the cause. And also respecting me as a leader, and not micromanaging, not going around me and talking to my staff directly or telling the staff what to do, but respecting me as a leader and a woman. But that's, you know, that's a perfect board member as well. And finally, and this is a debatable topic, but I think every board member, especially at a foundation, should be making a big stretch gift every year. That's an unrestricted gift to our foundation that we can do what we want with it. And the reason for that, I don't know how someone can be on a board and be asking other people in the community to donate if you're not donating in a big way yourself.
You know, that's interesting, right? I mentioned that my experience was they were looking for people primarily with connections and big pockets. Can we talk a little bit about what that means, Jen, in terms of a stretch donation, and is there a range there? I mean, that's another place where someone might assume, well, I can't afford to give $10,000, so I shouldn't try to get on a board. But what does that range look like, and what does the stretch mean? Is it variable?
Yes, I mean, for every organization in the Keys, the definition of a major gift or a stretch gift will be different. And then also for the person, you know, if we have someone that's not a super wealthy individual on our board, and like we said, we want diversity, so not everyone's going to be able to give $25,000 every year. But if you can, and for some people that's nothing, you know, so it's like us giving $5 or something. So the stretch gift is really widely interpreted, and I'm sorry for the two organizations you served on that you had such a bad experience. But it's definitely a conversation that we have, you know, before we bring someone to the board. And no matter what, on our board, you have to give at least $1,000 unrestricted every year. But that's the minimum. Most of our board members give a lot more, and that's just the culture. But we're also a foundation, so it could be different than if you're, you know, environmental or a pet rescue.
Right. Okay, now Emma, let's go back to you on anything to add there on what you look for in a board member as a staff employee.
Yeah, so you know, everything Jen said, but I would just add to that, it's really helpful to have board members who have great communication skills. So back to what skills you might need, but great communicators and collaborators. A board is truly a team unit, and it requires folks to work together. That doesn't necessarily always mean that everyone is going to agree, but having, you know, an understanding and willingness to be able to collaborate and to compromise in cases, I think, is a necessary part of being a good board member.
And Susie, anything to add there?
Yeah, so from the staff perspective, for me, what I'm looking for in the board member, I mean, pretty much everything that Jen and Emma have said. You want them to be engaged, you want them to be supportive of you, involved in what you're doing, you know, getting clear direction of their expectations, I think, is really important to me. You don't want that nebulous feeling of, you know, am I doing what they want? Am I not? You don't want to have to guess. You want them to be direct. Communication, as Emma said, is so important. And you know, to be available when you need them, that's very important. Again, you know, it comes back down to that they are probably most volunteers, so you have that fine line. But respect, and Jen mentioned that too. You know, you want them to have respect for I want them, you know, to respect me and my job, that they hired me for a reason, you know, because I was qualified to do this job. And while I do need their support and their engagement, you know, a good board members will let their director do the job that they've been hired for, and take the reins while giving them the backing that is required.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's curious about the selection process, right? Let's say I'm interested in joining a board. What are the typical selection processes for different boards? Are they different? Does it vary? Leanne, you've been a member of various boards. Is it pretty consistent across those boards, or do different boards bring on new board members in different ways?
I found that in my experience that different boards bring on members in different ways. Sometimes it can be that they want you to start out on a committee. Montgomery County Stars of Hope, we want the board members to be on a committee. And quite frankly, that's a little bit of a testing ground to make sure your enthusiasm is there and to make sure that your enthusiasm wasn't just for an event, but instead is for the organization as a whole. And sometimes what you find out from people that participate or volunteer for an event is that's their passion, that event, as opposed to the organization or the board as a whole. So some boards do require that you participate in a committee prior to being brought onto the full board. Other ones, it's simply a matter of tapping you on the shoulder. And again, I'm throwing back to Emma. And then most of us as women ask, what does that entail? What would you expect from me? You know, what qualifications do you think I have? And then deciding if I feel I have those. But usually a vote is involved from the rest of the board. So that's been my experience, is overall usually either a nominating committee or service on a committee prior to.
So does that mean in some cases there's even an interview process when you say that the board has to vote? Do they interview the person and then take a vote?
Well, I've had experience where it's been either a nominating committee interviews and meets with that prospective member and does lay out the expectations, sometimes to include a certain level of contribution financial, and sometimes a certain level of commitment of contribution by time. And then that committee can bring that information forward to the entire board. The prospective member is not standing necessarily in front of that board during the vote. But the flip side of that is I've also been on boards where really the member comes in, sits down, presents themselves and their desire to serve on the board, and then one of the board members nominates them and the rest of the board votes.
And Susie, you're currently on the nominating committee for BPW because we're about to nominate a new board in May. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that process works.
Yeah, so both Upper Keys BPW and BPW of Florida are currently searching for a new board that will be inducted in May. For BPW of Florida, Upper Keys BPW, I am chairing the nominating committee this year as I step out of the leadership position. I'm going to be helping to transition the new board. And with us, the nominating committee is more a process of, talking to members, getting recommendations from other members of people they think would be good in leadership. We do look to committees, anytime that we have someone interested in leadership or someone that we might want to tap for leadership, we try to get them on committees, obviously try to get someone to chair a committee. That's a very natural transition from a committee chair onto the board. And BPW of Florida does it in a similar way, asking for recommendations from other people to come on and be on the board. We don't have a lot of like fiduciary requirements or anything like that like Jen was mentioning. When I used to be at the American Cancer Society, that was something we did. We had different committees or boards for different events. And sometimes depending on the event, it might be that you're required to be a worker bee, or some committees you were actually, like for our Diamond Gala, that we wanted our committee members to either be big sponsors and give a large commitment or be committed to bringing in a couple of big sponsors. So I think, as Leanne said, different boards are different. But I think for BPW, we really like that nominating committee because then, you have a committee chair and then a couple of people on a committee to discuss the pros and cons of the people you're talking about. So it's not just like one person saying, hey, I want to be on a board, and then somebody saying, okay. There is a sort of a process, not so much an interview per se, but a discussion to see what they might be interested in and whether or not they're qualified and it's a good fit.
And Jen or Emma, do either of you have an example that's significantly different from what Leanne and Susie have mentioned, a completely different process? Or is it, it seems like a lot of it is personally tapping or recruiting, one-on-one, identifying people who might be good candidates. Do you know of any different experience in that?
Ours is pretty similar. We're lucky that we have a lot of people that want to be on our board. It's considered one of the better boards to be on in the Keys. So we have a list of people, and since our new terms start July 1st, we at our last board meeting took the list of people that have come to us wanting to be on the board, and the people, some of them from our regional advisory councils that we think should be prospects, and we presented that whole list to the board and just threw it out to them. Are there any objections before we even talk to the people about being on the board? And then just to make sure there's not something really bad we don't know about someone on the list, or some conflicts that we don't realize. And then once we have that list approved, we're literally like taking each of the people out to lunch and then gonna talk to them about it. And then the ones that we pick, we'll actually have them come to the board meeting and introduce themselves. So it's got a little bit more extensive process.
Yeah. Emma, anything different?
The only thing that I would add is that we have an application that someone would have to submit that includes all of the roles and responsibilities of the board member, so that they have that information up front, and a couple of questions just to help inform our board and our nominating committee just about the candidate and their background and interest in the organization.
So Jen, you mentioned that you actually have people coming to you saying, I would like to be on your board, where I think some other organizations are recruiting, right? They're trying to get people to join the board. You're in a great position. But if I'm interested in joining a board, is that the best way to look for opportunities? Simply to find the organizations first and then reach out to someone on that in that organization and just say, I'm interested because of the cause that you support?
Right. There's different ways to identify organizations that might be a good match for what you're passionate about. So that's a good place to start. And our community foundation has a directory. It's at cffk.org/nonprofits. And you can search by cause, like animals or environment or the arts. And then you can search by area of the Keys. And that's like a good place to start. And then start talking to people involved. And like you said, call them up and then visit the nonprofit, go to their events, volunteer. It pays to do a lot of research, because when you get into a 2 or 3 year board term, it's like getting married. So you want to date first and find out what you're getting into exactly.
And Emma, anything to add there?
Not too much more to add to that, but yeah, I would always say walk in the door ask past or current leadership, either on the board or staff, for a cup of coffee or a cocktail to go and learn more about the organization and really get a feel for the organizational culture. And if you think that you might be a good fit. I do know that, coming from the perspective of a smaller nonprofit, a younger nonprofit, that we are always looking for great folks to contribute their time and skills, and are always looking for new faces to serve on the board at Florida Bay Forever.
And is that true right now? I do want to give an opportunity to anyone, whether it's a panelist or someone in the audience, in the attendee list, if you know of open board positions or boards that are currently recruiting and seeking members, let's share that information. I mean, we mentioned BPW. We are actively looking for board members. Anybody else, including attendees, if you know of anything, put it in the chat and we will share.
Tricia, I would like to add, I think one of the best ways to find out what's going on in your community is being active in your community. Be out there, go to events that are happening around town, go to chamber events, meet people, give out your card. That's how you're going to find out what's going on around town.
Great. And again, we talked a little bit about this, but short of being on a board, let's say someone doesn't feel they have the time or would like to dip their toes in the water first, what are the different ways that they can go in that direction without making the board commitment first, right? What are the other ways they can show support and get involved in the organization they're interested in? Leanne?
Well, I think we can start by saying donate, donate, donate. We're not going to get anybody that's here today disagree with that. And sometimes donation is not a financial check. It is the donation of your time, your talents, your expertise, your education, your community perspective. So I would say attendance at events is huge. It's how you decide whether or not you're passionate enough about what this board or organization's mission is. And then I believe next to that, you start out by serving either as an event planning person or a committee person, or if the board is wanting you on the board immediately, then that's the next natural step for you.
Susie, anything to add?
Yeah, in my experience, volunteers are vital to most nonprofits day-to-day organization. If you're interested in someone, like, again, I'll use Marvelous Pet Rescue as an example, but volunteers are vital to us. I could not get my day-to-day work done without the volunteers that we have, whether it be, volunteering to help at an event, at a yappy hour, just helping me set up tables and, tear it down at the end of the day, or coming in and actually helping, learn to do our donor software and help send out thank you letters. And, there's so many levels of volunteering that you could do for an organization. You never know what they might need, whether it be transporting a dog or, doing computer programming. There's a wide array of need in most nonprofits. And some of it is a lot lesser commitment to begin with than actually getting on the board. And it gives you some experience with them. You get to know, the leaders in the organization, learn their mission a little better, and then whether it's going to be a good fit for you to eventually serve on the board.
So there is, let's see, there are a couple of notes in the chat about board positions. Early Learning Coalition of Miami-Dade Monroe has an ad for board members in the current Upper Keys Weekly, page 23. And the Florida Keys Wildlife Society is looking for individuals passionate about conserving endangered wildlife and unique Keys habitats who are interested in volunteering in numerous capacities, including committees and board. So there are a couple of opportunities right there, in addition to the BPW ones we all know about. Okay, and anything else on the how else to get involved? Anything to add there? Either.
Social media is so big now. Just sharing posts for organizations that you care about and see if the organization notices, because when someone shares one of our posts, hundreds more people will see it, and it's really doing a lot in the Keys, which is so spread out.
That is a great and easy way to support the organization, right? Is to just share. It's awesome. And Emma, anything else? Did we cover everything?
Took the words out of my mouth. Buy tickets to events, buy memberships, donate, share that post on Facebook, and just, be an ambassador for the organization in the local community. If they're doing great work, tell your friends about it.
Great. Okay, I have one more question. We're going to go around the group. I have one more question. So attendees, once we answer this question, we'll take any final questions that you have. So please put them in the chat if you have them. But right now we're going to kind of go around the room, and I'd just like to ask, what is one piece of advice you would each offer to someone who's considering serving on a board, perhaps for the first time? So Jen, would you like to start?
Sure, and it's great that we have so many people participating that have been on boards, but if there are some people thinking about a first-time experience, I would just first soul search, what is your goal? Why are you thinking about joining a board? Is it to meet people? Is it to help the cause? If or you're just trying to get it on your resume, and how someone said fluff or pad your resume. Because if you think about it and write down your goals, if you really want to help people who are in need, you might better serve your time just going and volunteering at the food pantry or helping out at the homeless shelter, do laundry there. When you're just joining a board, you're sitting in board meetings, you're taking on a lot of liability, you're taking on years of commitment, literally. And if things go bad with a nonprofit, when I first started at the Good Health Clinic, they were like running out of money right before the time that I started. And the board that they had was fantastic. They had to go out and literally like knock on their friends' doors and ask for money. And you see how it's thriving today. But that board, if you're in on a board and something bad happens, you know, you're on that. So I guess my advice for a first timer would be like, really think it through and soul search. Why are you thinking about a board and what are your goals in joining one?
Great advice. Leanne, how about you?
And I'll go to two extremes. I agree with Jen, you know that that's the board and the mission that the board has that you want to be a part of. And if you're unsure, contribute in ways prior to getting on the board. You'll know pretty quickly if that board is a board that you'd like to serve on. And unfortunately, sometimes boards don't do well. And you also get the chance to see if the board is actually following their mission. And for most of us that are serving, we want to know that. We want to know that our voice is heard. We want to know that our ideas are important. And that goes back to passion. So I'll say that too. Stay on a board as long as you're passionate. Some boards do have term limits, and I personally think that can be a very good thing. I also will tell you that I think it's, again, probably part of some of our female side that we should, when we no longer have energy for it, don't have new ideas, know when to step down, know when to give somebody else a chance to be on that board. It doesn't mean you still cannot be a financial supporter, a volunteer, a committee member, or simply supporting that organization in another way throughout the community.
Great. Emma, piece of wisdom?
So I will echo comments that I have made throughout our lovely panel today. And part of it, I think, is showing up fully, not being afraid to ask questions, the difficult ones too, and really speaking up when you have input. As we've talked about, you are tapped and selected for these organizations and to serve because the existing board sees your participation as not only incredibly valuable to the success of and mission of these organizations, but required in order for it to succeed. And so again, I would just say show up. It really takes an entire board to make these organizations run, and your role matters. So show up fully and enjoy the ride.
Wonderful. And Susie?
So for me, all of the things everyone has said, but I think it's very important, familiarize yourself with the mission. Make sure you understand exactly what that organization is all about, and that it's something you believe in and can support, and that you're passionate about. That's what I still go back to, that, have a passion for it. And just do it. Don't question. We've talked a lot about how we tend to question whether we have the skills and we're, have what they're looking for. If it's something you believe in and you want to do, put yourself out there and do it, and make sure you're able to make the time to be fully involved.
Yes, I will second that. Just do it, right? I think one of the benefits for me of having joined the BPW board is, relationships, right? Very quickly. It's one thing to join an organization, but when you volunteer to help add value to that organization, you also connect in a much more meaningful way with your fellow members and build relationships really quickly. And as we all know, especially if you're new to a community or haven't really engaged fully with the community, it can be difficult to build those relationships in our regular lives. And so really jumping into an organization helps build those relationships really fast. And it's been very, very rewarding for me personally as well.
And it's just such a great way to get more out of, if you're a member, like again, BPW is a good example. If you're already a member of the organization, becoming involved on a committee or the board, you just get so much more out of your membership. You meet more people, you develop deeper relationships, and just learn more about, about the mission and what it's all about.
Great. We do have a question coming in through the chat to the panelists. If you were interested in serving on a board, what would be the one thing you would ask for that you think would help you make your decision to be on the board or not? So what would be helpful in making the decision? What should you ask the current board members or organization? Who would like to take that first?
I think for me, it would go back to some of the things I've already said, is understanding what they do. What is your mission? What is your purpose? What is the fundamental reason for your organization that your board serves?
Great. What else? Who else has a suggestion on this one? What would you ask?
I would definitely ask for the job description. It was brought up earlier because most organizations do have a board member job description that will say how many meetings there are, how much money you have to give if you have to serve on a committee. But then I would take it a step further, like we also talked about earlier, and that going and talking to the executive director, because sometimes and the board members, because what's on paper might not be what the reality is. They might say you're spending like 2 hours a month, but in reality, they're all spending 25 hours a month. And so you need to find out what the real culture is and how fun it is. Do the people seem like, talk to them, get the job description, but then find out what the culture is. And I didn't mention earlier also that Dress for Success, the first board I was on, I met my best friend that I've had for over 15 years, because if the boards have a culture and it's a family, and you want to see if you feel like you fit in that family, which isn't all on the paper job description, although that would be what I would ask for.
Great. Emma?
I think I would ask, it would be 2 questions. I'm probably on top of the ones that Susie and Jen mentioned, but my question would be, what are the organization's goals over the next year and the next 5 years? Because you want to get a sense of what you're signing up for and what the immediate goals for the organization are and what your workload's going to be like and how that fits into the big picture strategy of the organization, to kind of give you a snapshot of what you're going to be doing and working on over the next multiple years of your term.
Great. Leanne, how about you?
Well, everything that's been said so far. And I think, again, sometimes part of your value is that self-reflection. So a realistic decision is critical. Number one, yes, the job description about how many hours and speaking to other board members. And then truly, I might feel very, very enthusiastic about an event, but my enthusiasm has to be measured through so many of the other things that you all brought up: future goals, successes of the organization, or what you can bring to the table, and can your enthusiasm really carry through? If the board's having a difficult time or dealing with a large number of board members that are gone, knowing that you are going to have to take up the slack, some of that a little bit of introspective thought. Am I going to be able to give that energy, sustain that energy? I think that's important. You have to ask yourself that question, because otherwise you might be just filling a seat on the board. So make sure that you're not just wanting to fill a seat, or when the time has ended and somebody else should fill the seat, make sure you're ready for that. So I think one of the questions is really, am I willing to follow through on my enthusiasm, honor the mission, and push that mission forward?
And, I'd like to add my own tip here. I think it would be great to ask, what is the onboarding or orientation training process, right? I think that was one of the big ahas, again, that I had about those first 2 experiences, that they put you on the board, they invite you to a meeting, and there was no orientation, there was no training, there was no discussion about expectations at all. They just expect you to just kind of jump in and know what to do and how it works and what that culture is. And so I would definitely ask about the onboarding, training, orientation process. So I want to throw a couple more things coming in from chat. Emma says that Florida Bay Forever, her organization, is seeking board members currently, and you can email her directly. And that her email address is there, emma@floridabayforever.org. And then we have another question for the panelists. This is a fun one, Jill. Are there any fun perks of being a board member that you've enjoyed? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. Friendship is immediately what comes to mind. Fantastic friendship. That is just one of the, to me, best perks of serving on a board, because I do believe that you kind of get a family atmosphere and build great lifelong friendships.
Yeah, for me too. Friendship connection in general, I think is what I've gotten the perk, I guess, out of it. In addition to the family of the board itself and that bonding that you experience serving on a board with someone. It's also a way you just can connect more. Like with BPW, I found that I connect with the members more by being on the board. When, if you're just another member, you show up at meetings, you try to talk to as many people as you can. But when, you're on a board or on a committee, you're automatically a little more, it's just easier to connect, and you find that you get to know more of the people in the organization. I think that's what I've really enjoyed. And Pajasi, there's a comment that from the former treasurer of Marvelous Pet Rescue, that the puppies are definitely a perk for me in my current position. I have a cute little Shih Tzu out in my office as we speak, waiting on me to come back out and love her some more.
And I'll add, I think some of the, I don't know, if you would put it in the fun category or not, but certainly as part of BPW board, there have been opportunities for training, for going to state conference and things like that I would consider valuable perks for sure, right? The Leadership Academy attendance was very valuable, and also fun from the perspective of being together and meeting so many people who are involved in nonprofits across the Keys. So that was definitely a perk. Jen, I'm sure you like hearing that. Okay, any final questions? I don't see anything else coming in. So, and we are at 1:21, so just a few minutes left, 1:22. I just want to say thank you again to everybody and remind everyone to please go to the upperkeysbpw.org website if you would like to know more about our events or about our scholarship opportunity. And thank you again for the contributions to the scholarship fund, over $350 from the attendees. That is awesome, and will certainly go to good use. With no more questions coming in, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. There are lots of thanks starting to come in now. And have a great rest of the weekend. And I hope this has inspired some people to raise their hands for committee service, volunteers, and board service. Good luck to you all. And remember Emma's words that we are all qualified. We should not question ourselves anymore. Great tip. And thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Patricia. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
And everyone who gave the $50 contribution will get a mention in the newsletter. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. That was amazing.